There's this interesting moment in time for some directors, where their visual or dialogue style in films are repeated so often that it becomes an eventual part of the marketing for subsequent films that they inevitably end up doing. And while there are a number of top names that we can attribute this to, none seem to be quite like Zack Snyder.
For me, I still have the childlike enthusiasm for the day-to-day work on the movie set. Like, we're gonna make up this crazy shit and we're gonna film it.
Now, it would be ridiculous to claim that Zack Snyder, the director behind visually stunning and stylistically distinct films, hasn't left an incredible mark on Hollywood. However, in recent years, the marketing of Zack Snyder himself, or perhaps more so Zack Snyder's style, often seems to overshadow the reception of his actual films. And yet, it's because of that same style that Snyder's films often generate significant buzz and anticipation, particularly among his devoted fan base, myself included. But then, especially more recently, almost like clockwork, the moment a film of his comes out, there's almost an immediate disconnect between the hype surrounding Snyder and the critical reception of his movies, which almost always ends up raising questions about the effectiveness of his marketing compared to the quality of his work. One of the main reasons why the marketing of Zack Snyder himself ends up helping his movies is his unique visual style and knack for creating visually arresting imagery, from the stylized action sequences of 300 to the epic scale of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Snyder's films are undeniably visually striking. Hell, just look at Rebel Moon, especially before the first one came out. The trailer alone was so visually striking that the hype was almost too much for the movie to live up to. His distinct aesthetic, characterized by slow motion sequences, bold color palettes, and dynamic camera work, sets his films apart and makes them instantly recognizable. It's because of this that Zack Snyder's visual style has become a key selling point in the marketing of his films, often featured prominently in trailers, posters, and promotional materials. But it's that same style that's often the reason why some of his films end up being, well, poor. Furthermore, it's Zack Snyder's status as a filmmaker with a passionate fan base that has contributed to the effectiveness of his marketing efforts. His films, particularly those that were set within the DC extended universe, had garnered a dedicated following of fans who eagerly anticipated each new release, no matter what the reception was to the previous one. Then, add in the fact that Snyder willingly and openly engages with his fans on social media, and that further cultivates a sense of community and loyalty among his fan base, who then in turn often rally behind him in support of his creative vision. The fact that his version of the Justice League even got made is proof enough of his ability to create grassroots support that helps generate buzz and excitement for his films, even in the face of critical backlash or mixed reviews. Additionally, Zack Snyder's involvement with high-profile projects and collaborations with established franchises has elevated his profile in the industry, and once again has contributed to the effectiveness of his personal marketing. His directorial work on adaptations of iconic properties such as Watchmen, 300, and the DCEU films has capitalized on existing fan bases and built-in audiences, which almost always essentially ensure widespread awareness and anticipation for your work. We were always going to watch Batman and Superman, regardless of whose name was attached, but it was Zack who got to benefit from it. Furthermore, Snyder's collaborations with major studios, such as Warner Brothers and Netflix, have provided ample resources for his marketing and promotion, enabling his films to reach a wider audience leading up to their release. But that's where it has to end. It's where even me, a person who's widely defended Zack, and at the very least will continue to defend some of his stuff, like Man of Steel and 300, can no longer continue to defend a lot of his recent work. Because once you get past the mirage, the name, the cool trailer with the awesome music, it dawns on you just how much the marketing of Zack Snyder protects Zack Snyder. Especially when it comes to not only the stuff that he directs, but also writes. Stuff like Sucker Punch, Army of the Dead, and Rebel Moon. You begin to realize just how heavy the overemphasis of style over substance is with him. That spectacle is the story to Snyder, much more than narrative depth or character development. And yes, Snyder does an incredible job at spectacle, legitimately. But it so often comes at the expense of coherent storytelling and meaningful character arcs. In fact, in many cases, his characters lack depth and complexity, making it difficult for audiences to connect or invest in their journeys. And weak character development is a near surefire way to undermine the emotional impact of a film and leave viewers feeling disconnected from the story. And with that disconnect comes an inconsistent tone. Something Snyder's gotten a lot of backlash for when it came to the DCEU, mainly because of the aspect of dark and gritty mixed with superheroes, which was polarizing for a lot of people. While there were many who did appreciate his darker take on familiar stories, others found it to be overly bleak. And many times in later movies, his response to that has been to try and force specific scenes to make it seem like that's not the case, something Rebel Moon is a prime example of. But then the problem with that is that it detracts from the overall cohesiveness of a film, and thus makes it difficult for audiences to try and fully engage. Or worse, even be able to follow the story in the first place. Inconsistency creates narrative confusion because of convoluted plots that are convoluted because the focus was not on the story but instead on the spectacle. And of course the spectacle is the focus because that's Zack Snyder's calling card. I think one of the worst things Zack Snyder has been doing recently has been putting out all that talk about director's cuts. Rebel Moon, Sucker Punch, more Justice League. And a part of you just has to go like, what are we doing here? I mean, his supposed director's cuts of Rebel Moon are set in an alternate universe, despite the fact that we don't really learn that much about the current one. And Sucker Punch apparently is just more story to tell. And I'm not so sure more hours are needed of either one.